Hello and welcome again to Conscious TV. I'm Iain McNay and today our guest in the studio is Andrew Cohen. Hi Andrew.
Hi.
And I'm going to start by reading a quote from your first book which I loved, and the quote is, "This book is the story of a man whose passion for the truth became a hurricane." Now that's quite a statement.
Was that statement made by myself or someone else?
That was the introduction of your first book.
Okay, so I didn't write the introduction. So that was someone commenting about my own passion, I suppose.
I hardly know you. I've met you once briefly before, but you give the image of being a bit of a hurricane. And I wonder, has that always been there, that energy
Ever
in you?
Ever since I became a teacher, I've been very passionate about affecting change in the world. So yes, I'm very passionate about what I'm doing, and I care very much about leaving a mark here in the world, for sure. I want to make a difference. I want the world to be a different place because I was here.
And how did this all start? How did your search start?
Well, originally it started because when like many people, I had a spontaneous experience of awakening. It was an experience of actually cosmic consciousness when I was a teenager, when I was 16 years old. And I was brought up in a secular household, a secular Jewish household, so I had no notion of the divine, no notion of God, no notion of any of these things. And I remember I was living in Italy at the time with my mother, and I remember seeing a television program that was about Buddhism. And one of the scenes in this documentary where it was somewhere in Southeast Asia, and there was a huge Buddha statue, enormous, and there were, it seemed like at least 100 monks prostrating before this enormous Buddha statue. And I remember at the time I had no idea what would cause a human being to bow down before, a statue like this. I had no idea what would incline a human being to do that. So then I was sitting up late one night having this conversation, and I don't even remember what I was talking about, but for no particular reason, the doors of perception opened, and it's very difficult to explain this in words, but I suddenly became aware of the whole cosmos. I realized that the whole cosmos was one conscious, self-aware being, and that the nature of this being was a kind of impersonal or absolute love, the experience of which was completely overwhelming. It was physically overwhelming, physically unbearable. I realized at that moment that there was no such thing as death. It also became obvious to me that no matter which point in space one went to, one would always be in the same place. And I was just sitting there with tears streaming down my cheeks, utterly in a state of awe and wonder. And that was my spiritual initiation, and I have no idea why it happened. But the impact of this was quite profound, and after a couple of days it faded. But I knew then that was the most important thing that had ever happened to me. I'd never been so alive or in touch with life or what was real. And then later, when I was 22, I began to be haunted by this event, because at the end of this particular spiritual initiation, I received, and it's hard to explain this in words, almost like a message, even though it doesn't really make any sense to talk in this way. But the sense was, if you devote your life to me and me alone, if you pursue this, what had revealed itself to me, I had nothing to fear. But if I didn't, and I wasn't sure what it meant. But anyway, when I was 22, I began to be haunted by this experience. And then when I was 22, at a certain point, I decided to, I was pursuing my desire to be a jazz drummer at the time. And I gave that up and decided to wholeheartedly devote myself to becoming an enlightened person. I didn't even know what it meant. But I knew that I knew that what I was looking for was real because I'd experienced it. And many other seekers that I met at the time were hoping that this other dimension of reality existed, but most people, besides having drug experiences, had never actually had any direct experiences of it. But because of this experience I had when I was of cosmic consciousness that I had when I was a teenager, I had no doubt that it existed.
So it gave you a reference point that was tangible.
Faith and conviction. Yeah. I knew it was possible.
Yeah.
And I also, for some reason, I don't know why, I was confident that I would get there. I mean, I had a very deep sense of confidence that it was just a matter of time and will, and then sooner or later it was going to happen.
Yeah. Is this something you've always had in yourself, this kind of confidence inside?
No. I think really, as a younger person, I lacked a lot of self-confidence, and really it was only when as I got older, and it was really when I decided to become a spiritual seeker full-time, to be honest.
Yeah.
I remember I was doing psychotherapy. I was in psychoanalysis.
10 years, I think, you were in psychotherapy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember at a certain point I decided I wanted to be free. And I told the analyst, I said, I don't really want to do this anymore. I want to be free. And he said, you're just getting started. And I felt no fear, and I got up and I looked at him. I said, I don't want to do this. I want to be free. And ever since the moment when I decided that I wanted to be a liberated man, and I really meant it, and I really did mean it, and I knew that I'd be willing to do just about anything to succeed. That was really when a sense of confidence as an individual began to grow.
And so, what form did your search take initially?
I did all the things that seekers do. I started reading books about spiritual philosophy. I started going to every spiritual teacher that I could, that I thought would be of interest. I took initiation from an Eastern spiritual master. I started meditating every day. I started meeting friends who were interested in consciousness. I was really pretty serious about it.
And did you feel you were getting towards something, or was it you'd go down one particular route and then you decided that didn't work and you tried something else? Was it kind of a process as such, or was it a series of meeting dead ends?
I think it was a process. I didn't feel it was a series of dead ends. I think once I started wholeheartedly on the path, my life was lit up with the conviction that I was really going somewhere and that I was also going to get there. So I was very inspired by that.
Yeah, I think you did very long meditation retreats, didn't you?
I did many Buddhist meditation retreats, not because I had any interest in Buddhism as a philosophy, but just simply because they provided an environment in which one could sit for very long periods of time and be supported.
And did that come easy to you, meditation?
Sometimes it came easy. Sometimes, especially if you're doing it for days and weeks at a time, sometimes it was quite a struggle. But part of spiritual development really is learning how to struggle through different psychological states, and not back down, but to hold a certain presence of mind and presence of awareness. And so I think that learning how to struggle through that is part of the maturing process, part of how we discover to become a strong person.
Did you ever feel like giving up and having an ordinary life?
Never.
No.
Never. Well, that was the difference between me and most other people I met on the path, is that I would meet people on spiritual retreats or in spiritual gatherings that if they were in the presence of a great spiritual master, or if they'd done a long meditation retreat, they'd be lit up temporarily. But then I would often notice, fall back into what's traditionally called a worldly perspective. In other words, they lost touch with the fact that there was something really very significant that they were looking for. And once I got on the path, I never really lost my focus.
And
I was very, very one-pointed.
And how did you support yourself financially as you were doing all this?
Well, I was working for part of the time, and then I had a small inheritance from my grandmother, which provided me with a small income, but it was enough to survive on.
So, would you say the turning point was going to India and meeting Punjaji?
Well, without a doubt. The meeting Punjaji, of course, was the end. Was when my seeking came to an end. But I remember just going to India, which is something I only wanted to do for a very short time, because I felt at that time I'd already met all the most important spiritual teachers in the world, or most of them, because they were all traveling. So I felt there was nothing. I was pretty sure by that time there was nothing in India to find that I couldn't find in America. And I'd also met many people that spent years in India that didn't seem any more enlightened than I was. But in any case, I felt I needed to go. But when I arrived in India itself, what happened for me that was so important is that I was able to express my passion for seeking for enlightenment with unself-consciously. In America, and I was living in New York, when I really started to express how passionate I was about this, people thought I was a little crazy. But when I went to India, I was able to express unself-consciously and explore this passion. And so that's why when I arrived there, I decided to stay.